The St. Louis Blues used offer sheets to get ready for the upcoming season, and it worked. Dawson Mercer is still negotiating with the New Jersey Devils. We have the latest, and the Carolina Hurricanes have had more turnaround than almost anyone in the National Hockey League. We'll cover all of that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor-Simon. And Haley, it's been a very eventful offseason for the Blues. Let's start with the two offer sheets because that is a little outside the box maneuver here by the Blues. What were your thoughts about the offer sheets and why did they take this approach?
I was a little surprised about it too. It was something that kind of shocked me, but Doug Armstrong, GM of the St. Louis Blues, did kind of insinuate that something might be coming like this, so I wasn't overly shocked. However, I think that this approach, we don't see it often, right? This was the 11th and 12th since 1998, given out. So I think that this approach, though, it was strategic and it was smart. Doug Armstrong knew that Stan Bowman and the Edmonton Oilers wouldn't be able to match. I mean, they potentially could have matched Holloway, but Broberg, I don't think they were going to touch that at all. So I think it was a smart approach. You got 2 first-round draft picks for very little you gave away. You gave away prospect Paul Fisher, who was a defenseman. You gave away that second round and that third round, and that was it. So it was strategic, it was smart, and it got them to St. Louis.
And how do they fit in with the Blues? What roles do you expect Broberg and Holloway to play this season and beyond?
Yeah, so I feel like there is a lot of pressure kind of put on these two players, right? The whole NHL is going to be looking at them and saying, is this a fail? Was this successful? I think that let's go talk about Broberg. I think on the defense, he's going to definitely elevate the defense. Second pair, maybe. Third pair, wouldn't be surprised. Holloway, on the other hand, I think that he's going to fit in very well in that third line. I wouldn't say that he's a top 6 guy yet. While he was impressive with the Edmonton's run in the playoffs, especially that goal against the Canucks, I talk about that all the time. That was a beauty 5-hole. But I think that he's just not that developed yet to confidently say, hey, we're going to make him a top 6 player. Not to say that he can't achieve that, but I think that they're going to fit in as playmakers, right? Broberg is really good on the power play defensively, and Holloway, he has speed and he's really good at puck possession and control. So I think they're going to elevate. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're going to be, really significantly improving the defense and the offense.
Those two offer sheets made the biggest headlines, but what were some of the other moves that you were pleased with or unhappy with that took place this offseason?
Ryan Suter, 100%. So with Suter, I'm sure you've heard about him too, about how he might be problematic in the locker rooms. And you're bringing this guy on defense who doesn't always have the best reputation. Now, I know in Dallas they liked him. So I did a crossover with Locked On Stars just to kind of see how they were feeling. And they said that he was better with the Stars players, but it made me a little bit nervous. But again, I think it's actually a strong move. Another move that happened is the uncertainty of Torrey Krug, who is one of our defensemen. We don't have any update yet on if he's going to be getting the surgery or not, but right now he's indefinitely out. So it did make sense that, Armstrong did get Suter, a veteran defenseman. Another thing that happened this offseason that I found quite interesting was the Joseph brothers, right? It's a feel-good story to have both of them on the Blues. However, I do think P.O. Joseph is the stronger of the two brothers. I know they both play different positions, but I do feel like he has more of an opportunity to get some more time on ice defensively. And then this was kind of like swept under the rug because it was during the NHL draft. I know I was in my hotel room writing about this and getting ready to do an episode on it. They got Texier from the Columbus Blue Jackets, who is a promising center. So I think that the Blues did make some good moves, and then they got Foxa. They did a lot, okay? But I think the biggest moves obviously was the offer sheets. But if you had to give me the second biggest, I would definitely say it's the uncertainty of Torrey Krug and Hal Armstrong kind of brought in some new talent just in case.
Talk to me a little bit about Jordan Binnington. I mean, he shined at times last year, kind of carried the Blues, kept them in contention. Can he do that again? And can he be more consistent?
Yeah, so Jordan Binnington had a great season last season, one of his best seasons since the Cup win season. I like to call it that because it's what happened. But yeah, his rookie season was unbelievable, and last season was unbelievable. Do I think he can do that again? That's putting a lot of pressure on Binner. I think that this season we did see him kind of take more of a mature approach in net, no outbursts or anything like that, which to some of you might be like, Haley, that's like the normal when it comes to goalies. But with Binner, he gets a little bit of a temper. So for me, I was happy to see him kind of grow up in a way. And I think also him knowing that he has to mentor a young Joel Hofer, who is his backup goalie, kind of contributes to that. He got married last offseason. He had a lot of real life things happen to him that I think did impact how he plays on the ice. And I think that we see a really mature Jordan Binnington in net. Now, again, last season, incredible season. Like statistically, I believe that he was ranked the 10th best goalie statistically with how he performed last season. So it's not just me being biased, being a Blues fan. This is me just being a fact person that he did stand out amongst the NHL in terms of goalies. This upcoming season, I don't expect him to play maybe as many games. And no, do not be concerned. This is not him getting ready to leave. He still has a couple years left on his contract. But I believe they're going to put Joel Hofer in net a little bit more to kind of give Binner that rest time. So I would still say, based off of last season, I expect him to have a good season. It just may not be as good as a season.
That's a pretty tough level to duplicate,
Yeah.
no doubt. Training camp is coming up really soon. What, in your mind, are the biggest questions facing the Blues as camp gets underway?
It's a good question. So, because I've had a lot of questions myself. So, obviously, the Blues brought in a bunch of players, which means, hey, we're not going to be able to fit everybody in this lineup come opening night. So, this is going to be a very competitive training camp. However, there is one player named Dvorsky, who was one of our first round picks in last year's draft, that feels pretty confident that he's going to make the team this season. I really like him. He's one of my favorite players. I have talked about him numerous times on Locked On Blues, kind of saying, hey, he needs to give this a shot, and he finally is. But I think there's going to be a lot of competition. So I want to see how Dvorsky is going to do. Do I think he's going to make the team? Yes. I don't think they're going to send him down in any way. However, though, there is that fourth line, and you have a guy like Nathan Walker. They extended him for 2 years last season. While he is a player that's very likable, a player that I like a lot, do I think that he's going to necessarily make opening night? I don't know. And that's the thing. I think some of these veteran players got a little comfortable, and it's not saying that they're lazy. It's just there's younger and faster skaters out there. So I think with training camp this year, we're not going to see the same, going through the motions. We're going to see some real competition. And again, this is for the defensive side too. You have Scott Perunovich, who got a 1-year contract extension, which I was kind of surprised about too. And then you also have Tyler Tucker, you have a Matthew Kessel. There is so much competition and only so many spots. So the only thing that I'm sure of is the goalies. I'm sure that Binner will be the starter and Joel Hofer will be the backup. Other than that, there's so much unknown. I'm even going through scenarios where Captain Braden Shen may not even be on the second line center. He might be dropping down to the third line center, which is something that maybe doesn't make sense to some people. But I think there's just so much talent on this team now that you have to kind of figure out where you put these extra bodies.
Well, competition is a good thing. Hopefully iron sharpens iron, as they say. Haley, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Absolutely. So you can find Locked On Blues on YouTube at Locked On Blues, on Twitter, same thing too, at Locked On Blues. And you can find me on Twitter at Haley T. Simon, talking all things hockey.
All right, Haley, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And look, this is a great time of year for betting on FanDuel. You could find all kinds of great things to bet on. You've got hockey futures, you've got college football, pro football, the baseball pennant races are heating up. So look at all the latest odds at FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Devils, Trey Matthews. And Trey, the big talk around the Devils as of right now, the ongoing contract negotiations with Dawson Mercer. Why don't you fill us in on the latest of what's going on right now?
Yeah, so I don't think there's much concern surrounding Dawson Mercer's contract because here's what's going on. He's a restricted free agent. He holds no arbitration rights. It's not a matter if, it's a matter when will a deal get worked out. And Tom Fitzgerald said during one of his summer press conferences that Dawson Mercer is, in fact, a part of the long-term solution. Now, the thing is, Mercer this past season, he had career lows in a lot of statistical categories. The only thing that was really consistent was the amount of games that he's played in. And I got to give him credit. He is the Iron Man for this New Jersey Devils roster. In his 3 years in the league, he has never missed a game due to injury or being a healthy scratch. He certainly knows how to go above and beyond the call of duty, but the facts are there. Statistically, he wasn't really all that great, but he still has a lot of untapped potential, I feel as though. And obviously, this past season for New Jersey didn't really go as planned just because the amount of injuries they dealt with. They were sellers at the deadline. They fired Lindy Ruff, just to name a few things. So I think Dawson Mercer certainly can take his game just a little bit higher. And I think this is where they're at an impasse, which is maybe Mercer wants to sign a 1-year extension just so he can get more money sooner rather than later, because like I said, he's a good player, but maybe Fitzy wants to sign him to a 2 or 3 year extension because here's something else you have to factor in. At the conclusion of this upcoming season, Luke Hughes is in need of a new contract because his entry-level deal will expire, and that kid is going to get paid if he has another good season, and rightfully so. There's a lot to factor in, and also maybe the Devils will be buyers at this year's trade deadline. So who's going to be available? What assets would they be willing to give up? There's some other players that might be in need of some new deals. There's so many moving parts to this mechanism that I can understand why maybe it's taking a little longer than anticipated to see where they're at with Dawson Mercer. But considering the fact he's a restricted free agent, holds no arbitration rights, I think a deal is going to get sorted out at some point. But I must be honest with you, Gil, even I didn't anticipate for it to be this long.
When does he get arbitration rights, for example? So if they sign him to a 1-year deal, does he become eligible for arbitration next summer?
We don't really know for the time being. I probably, because the thing is like people are comparing it to Jesper Bratt's situation, because if you recall, Jesper Bratt and Tom Fitzgerald, the front office, they were at an impasse as well in terms of contract extensions, because the thing is like Bratt could have made a lot more money, but Fitzy was trying to sign him on the down low. They couldn't come to an agreement, and he had to sign a 1-year extension, but he showed out and he showed that he is worth that money. And then that resulted in an 8-year extension. And then this past season, Bratt was an all-star. The thing for Dawson Mercer is that he's at the end of his entry-level contract. That's the thing. So to answer your question, I think that's definitely the direction that's going to go down, just because, like I said, he's at the end of his entry-level contract, and now they're trying to work out that new deal. That's where he's a restricted free agent in that sort of sense.
Now, there is a little bit of trophy buzz surrounding the New Jersey Devils, a player who could be in contention for the Hart this year. Talk to me about that.
Jack Hughes. But the thing is, we've been having the same conversation the last few years. Can Jack Hughes get his name into the Hart Trophy race? And here's my answer this upcoming season. It's possible, but the biggest thing is he needs to stay healthy, because there have been a few times when he's missed extended periods of action due to injury. So if he can gain some muscle, maybe just be more prepared, whatever the case might be, now he has some more people around him that are willing to fight on his behalf, because you don't want Jack Hughes taking on a fight with somebody. Just there's stronger pieces around him. We'll see what happens, but I'm not going to get my hopes up too high, but it's possible. I'll just say that. But like I said, Gil, we've been having the same song and dance routine the past couple seasons. I think Jack Hughes can definitely become one of the best players in this generation, or because Wayne Gretzky one time said that Jack Hughes has the best chance of catching 97 being Connor McDavid. Gretzky's words, not mine, so take it how you want to take it. But the thing is like, okay, I love the high praise from the great one, but Jack still has some work to do, and part of it is just staying healthy.
Yeah, it's hard to be a Hart Trophy candidate if you're not on the ice. There's no question about that. What are some of the biggest questions facing this team with training camp just about a week away?
I don't think there's too much concern or anything. I think the big thing is, can this team stay healthy? Because when you're missing players like Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, Dougie Hamilton, you other role players, so on, for extended periods of time, yes, you're not really going to be all that successful. And the Devils, unfortunately, fell victim to that just this past season. I think that's the biggest thing. What can this team do now that they're healthy? Because there's some other things that we need to factor in. Their goaltending did get better. Jacob Markstrom, Jake Allen. Their blue line got better. Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon. And we'll see what can happen to Luke Hughes and Shimon Nemeth now that they have more NHL experience under their belts. Or when it comes to their offense, they added Stefan Nason, Paul Cotter, Tomas Tatar. Okay, there's more depth, and you replace some of the holes that were left by Ryan Graves, Damon Severson, Michael McLeod. You replace those players. Now let's see what you can do and how can you elevate it a little bit more.
Are you concerned with all this roster turnover that it may take a little while early in the season for this team to gel?
I mean, I think, could they get off to a slow start? Maybe. But the thing is like, I'm rather confident in Sheldon Keefe and the direction he'll take this team. And Stefan Nason and Tomas Tatar, they've been here before. They're former Devils. Devils right. United with them. Well, obviously different coaches for both of them. But still, it's just like they've been here before. And you still got your core four in Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier. And don't forget about Dougie Hamilton. I consider Meier, Hischier, Bratt, and Hughes the core four, but Dougie Hamilton is someone you can't underestimate as well. But I think they're going to be just fine, honestly. I think just the biggest question is, can they stay healthy, and can this defense protect their netminders? That's also a big question.
And how do you see the goalie splitting the playing time this year?
Jacob Markstrom is going to be the bona fide starter. That was revealed by Tom Fitzgerald during his summer press conference. So, yeah, I think Jacob Markstrom will start a good majority of the games, which I agree with, just because I think Jake Allen was really good for New Jersey, and I thank Montreal every night for retaining half of his contract. And I also thank the Flames for retaining about 31% of Markstrom's contract. So the Devils got two solid goalies on the down low, and we talk about how short the goalie market is. So I think the goaltending is going to be just fine. Jacob Markstrom, he was the runner-up in the Vezina Trophy race a few years ago. Jake Allen, I think he got too much blame in Montreal. I think he was just fine with New Jersey. And if the Devils, by any string of luck made it to the playoffs. I said Jake Allen deserved a lot of the credit just based on how he elevated in between the pipes for New Jersey. But I think this goaltending tandem isn't going to be the best in the NHL. I don't really think so, but I think it's pretty solid if you ask me.
Certainly an upgrade over where they were a year ago, no question about that. Trey, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find Locked On Devils wherever you get your podcast from on YouTube, and you can find me on Twitter or X at TreyMatt4. And make sure you subscribe on the YouTube page. And if you enjoy listening to my show on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my Twitter page.
All right, Trey, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Gil.
It's great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, Zachary Martin. And Zach, we're getting close to the start of training camp. It's finally a little excitement, a little hockey buzz. There's a little chill in the air. But let's talk a little bit about the very active offseason that this team had.
Yes, and obviously, Gil, thank you as always for having me on. Yeah, it's definitely been a crazy offseason, and I am so ready for the fact that it's finally September. We get some form of hockey. I know it's training camp, but you know what? At least it's something that we can talk about rather than speculations and more speculations of things that may or may not even happen. But yeah, it's been interesting, that's for sure, for the Carolina Hurricanes. Been kind of busy, surprisingly enough.
Starting with a new GM.
Yeah, Eric Tolsky, just coming in, got that promotion from being an assistant general manager. Good for him. Talk about getting, thrown into the fire when the main guy kind of leaves, and then you have to figure out the draft and free agency, and you have a lot of guys that got paid who went to other teams. Steph Nason, Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, and that's just naming a few of them. Teuvo Teravainen, and then you have to figure out, okay, how are you going to replace them? And I think he did pretty decently on the fly of just, going through your first, free agency period and just trying to figure out how to form a roster that, keeps the team competitive for a seventh straight playoff appearance.
Out of all the players that this team lost, who do you think is going to be the most difficult to replace?
I would probably say probably Brett Pesce, just because of the fact of how good defensively he is. I know he's not he's no Jacob Slavin and stuff like that. Of course, you got your offensive guys like Brent Burns and Brady Shea, with Shea leaving. But I think just what Brett Pesce did kind of, was a solidified guy who played good defense while giving you a little bit of offense as well. But we'll still be able to, do special team, on the penalty kill and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be a little bit more difficult to, replace in a way, but it's not a big layer. I mean, you could maybe look at Teuvo Teravainen on the offensive side just because he was a top six guy that you're like, how do you replace a guy in the top six? So I would say that's a close one if you want to look at a forward that's kind of like, how do you replace a guy like that?
As far as the newcomers are concerned, who excites you the most?
You know what? If it wasn't for the guy that I am going to pick, I would have said Shingasisper because we had him before, but now he can for 3 full seasons. I would have been excited for him, which I still am. But I'm actually excited for Sean Walker. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think he's a very underrated signing that the Hurricanes got. A really great deal. I think it was like $3.6 million for 5 years. So you can lock this guy up for a good number of times. And he played really well in Colorado, played a good stints in Philadelphia as well, and even with the Kings. And I think he's your Brett Pesce replacement, to where he does play some good defense, but he does have some offensive upside to him as well. So if you put him possibly second D pair with Dmitry Orlov or keep with Shingasisper, I still think that's still a great pairing for them. But I'm excited for Sean Walker for the fact that you got him locked up for 5 seasons. I think, like I said, it's a very underrated signing that the Hurricanes got, just bringing him in.
There is a little bit of a cap crunch right now in Carolina. Now, I know there's a way out of this, but there is a cap crunch. Talk to me about that. Does it limit the team at all, and how are they going to handle it?
Yeah, so right now, as I think from what I saw from Puckpedia earlier today, they're like $79,900 something left in their cap. So yeah, they are pretty up there. luckily they're not like the Washington Capitals. They're like 10 million over the cap, so it's not as bad. But yeah, if you're looking at possibly making some moves, I think it's gonna be a lot of internal call-ups and send downs just because of the fact of how you're gonna work that with guys with contracts that are like $775,000 or maybe a little bit more like $950, and how you work that out. But with the fact that you do have, Jesper Foss officially going to be out for the season with his neck surgery, he's not officially on LTIR status, but there is that possibility that if the Hurricanes need to get some flexibility, they can do that. I know that's adding in like $2.4 million. So if you want to go and sign a guy or do offer sheets or anything like that, I know when you look at the actual cap space, it'll say that they're actually in the negatives, but if you look at the flexibility of the LTIR status, they're still cap compliant. So it's just using the CBA in a way that it's like, okay, yeah, you're over the cap without being over the cap just because of how that LTIR flexibility is. So there is an avenue of adding $2.4 million to that $79,000 if you want to look at trying to add some guys, which I think they probably should. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of, work that cap compliance with that type of movement.
You talk about adding some guys. What position do you think they should look to add at this point?
I know a lot of people are going to say center, and I wouldn't be upset with looking at a center just because of the fact that you have Sebastian Aho, obviously, as your first-line center. Just Barry Kotkaniemi did start the season last year pretty good, but then kind of really fell off a cliff, and there talks of him being the second-line center. You kind of hope that he does that because you really need it for the guy when you're paying him $4.8 million. Jordan Staal is your third-line center, and then you just re-signed Jack Drury to 2 more years of your fourth-line center. Past that, you got Tyson Jost, who's like someone that you can use as a 13th forward. Then you have Ryan Suzuki in the AHL, and then after that, it's kind of slim behind him too. So maybe you're looking at a center that you could use and be like, maybe I don't know if he's a bona fide second line center, or maybe someone who's just able to help bring some depth and release to it. I would even say left winger, honestly, too, because you lose Teuvo Teravainen and now you lose Jesper Foss, who's going to be on that right side. You could have had Jack Roslovic being your top 6. Now it's like, he could still be up there, but you're still looking at trying to figure out a winger spot that's kind of open. Now you could use someone like a Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake, Felix Leonard-Storm, but you have all these guys who played 3 games or less, or like under Storm played in the SHL last year. So it's looking at possibly a winger spot that really needs something. If you don't think that those young guys who are like 18, 19 years old aren't quite ready to go yet, I would say you wouldn't want to look for someone who could slide into the top 6 on that left wing on the second line with Kotkaniemi and Nietzsche. So I would say probably winger is probably the biggest area of need right now for them.
Any potential young breakout players that we should keep an eye on as training camp gets started?
Oh, geez. I would say if there's someone who's going to break out and maybe make the lineup, I would say Bradley Nadeau, just because of the fact that he's got an AHL shot already. You saw what he did with Maine last year. He played really well. And he had the most points and most goals for a guy since, I think it was the mid-2000s. So, and you saw what he did in Penticton. He had over 100 points in 40-something games in the BCHL. So that's someone to look at, too. I would say Jackson Blake. He had 60 points last year with North Dakota, and he was a Hobie Baker finalist. So that's another guy who could really slide into the lineup and maybe make some noise for the Hurricanes. So I would say those are the 2 guys you want to keep an eye on if you want to look for someone who could probably be a breakout guy and make the roster next year for a youngster.
Zach, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, of course. If you want to find the podcast, it's LO_Hurricanes on X. You can just look up Locked On Hurricanes on we're on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. There's also a link tree in my bio where you can find me. I'm at One True Zach on X. I do have a link tree where you can find all my articles that I do at the Hockey Writers, and of course all the links to the podcast are on there as well. So pretty easy to find.
All right, Zach, thanks so much.
Hey, thank you as always, Gil. Always a good time.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Locked On Fantasy Hockey will help you draft the best fantasy hockey team you can put together and maintain it throughout the hockey season. So make sure you join us for that. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guests, Haley Simon of Locked On Blues, Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes, and of course Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, Locked On NHL is here every weekday, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the league. So make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.